Hi, I'm Courtney Hale and I'm going to talk to you about King Philip the Fair and the war between the state and the church. This is a story about two evils fighting it out, both believing in their own cause much like any villain does. One thing which struck me over the semester is how some evil villains were explained away or excused for their behavior by claiming that it was normal in those times for that sort of action. I feel this is faulty logic, the banality of evil, so to speak. Humans know when we are doing something which is wrong, but we find ways to explain it or ignore it. And that is how a villain is created, and that is what happened here with King Philip and his campaign for money and victory over the papacy. Okay, so every villain needs a hero, and King Philip has his protagonist in the form of, well, it's a villain actually. Up to this time, Rome had ultimate and uncontestable authority over its kings, and King Philip wanted to change all that. Unfortunately, Boniface VIII, Pope at the time, quite ambitious himself, was set upon declaring even more power over the kings by stating that the papacy was above all other rulers. King Philip was having none of that. Even when he was declared excommunicated by Boniface VIII, that didn't stop him. He eventually resorted to brute tactics by capturing the Pope and most likely torturing him and then releasing him to die. Boniface was never tried for the heresy he was accused of, but because he died shortly after, that does sort of speak to what his treatment might have been like in the hands of his captors. So that ended the annoyance of Pope Boniface VIII for King Philip. Okay, the next thing Philip did to ensure his victory over Rome was complete was to get the appointment of Clement V, one of the weakest popes in the history of the papacy. It was rumored Clement was heavily influenced by the king, although it does seem he maintained a semblance of authority by issuing a decree here or there, which checked the king's ambitions, but not for long. He definitely seemed to be in the king's pocket. Everything Boniface did, this pope erased, overturned, basically made right with the king. Now, having that advantage, the first thing King Philip does after Clement V has the papal crown on his head, so to speak, is to continue his campaign against the church. Conveniently, the best target is one that he both owes money to and is also wealthy, the Knights Templar. In 1307, King Philip would order the mass arrest of the Knights Templar, which would get him out of great debt with them, and also gain him access to their wealth. Clement did very little to stop this, although his show of wanting to confirm the veracity of their crimes did slow down the process by creating a lengthy trial process. Basically, he's seen to have supported this act. How King Philip did this was basically to issue the arrest orders in secrecy, with the directions that all the letters be opened at the same time. That way, no warning could reach any of the knights before they were all in custody. Some knights supposedly escaped, but not their leader, Jacques de Molay. Another event which happened during King Philip's reign is that Pope Clement V moved the papacy to France, which really greatly improved the ease of which Philip had access to the Pope. With what happened to Boniface VIII, it's no wonder that any pope would worry about their usefulness to the king. It was also a fair sign of how much influence France had upon the papacy at that time. And although the trial would be drawn out, ultimately the knights would be convicted of heresy. Their confessions were initially tortured out of them. They recanted when Clement sent clergy to receive the confessions. This caused Clement to question the accusations and want them to be confirmed by trial, and the long wait for King Philip to rid himself of the Templars was caused by that. But King Philip did eventually get his money, and the Knights Templar were burned. The remaining knights are burned at the stake, and Europe can see how much power he wields over the papacy. It is rumored that the king, his advisors, and the Pope all received portions of the Knights Templars' treasure. Even though the knights ultimately lost and the church allowed it to happen, there was a curse. Supposedly, Jacques de Molay, after shouting his innocence, cursed both the king and the Pope while burning. Both of them would be dead within a year, but not without having left the imprints of their actions on all. I chose this example of a villain because I think it's important to realize that man is basically categorized by his actions only when he's struggling for his life. It's easy to be good when everything is okay. It's what separates us from the animals, that we are able to overcome our natures and do good rather than evil in order to survive. It's too bad sometimes that it does take a villain to open people's eyes to other wrongs in the world. I feel like a lot of the time we have our eyes shut for us by the people around us, by our leaders, and by the media. We need to keep them open and look for a chance where we have the chance to sacrifice something of our own for someone else, even if that thing is just simply our humility. Pope Boniface VIII is branded by many as a villain, even the most famous Dante Alighieri, who has him burning in the ninth circle of hell in his Inferno. However, the Pope never went outside the bounds of his authority. Does this excuse him for abusing his power? No, but it definitely places him second to the king in terms of true villainy. His papal decrees, additional lawmaking, and other acts while fighting the king still influence papal legacy today. After Clement V dragged the papacy to France, it would remain there for terms of 6 more popes, and 2 of them are 2 more usurper popes during one of the papal schisms. So what a mess that guy made. King Philip was responsible for the most powerful and successful campaign against the church. However, he is a villain because he used animal nature in resolving conflict, murder, deceit, and dishonor. He may also have been fighting an ambitious villain, but actually, since it's only when we're challenged do we get to find out our true natures, that doesn't give him any leniency in that judgment. His legacy would peter out after him, his sons having very short and very unlucky reigns. The House of Capet would die after them. And that's it for King Philip. This is definitely a favorite time period for me. I really enjoy religion and government, or religion and the people and the struggles, because I think it is the best opportunity to really see what kind of people we are. Are we good? Are we bad? And anytime you have a religion as being good and you have to question whether the actions are good themselves also, gives you a chance to think for yourself. So I hope you enjoyed my presentation, and thank you so much for listening.